Welcome to Camera Shake Podcast, episode 47. Today, we have another really super special guest. You might know her from The Bite Shot. But today with us is food photographer, YouTuber, educator, author, entrepreneur, and former podcast host, Joanie Simon. We have done our due diligence, as you can tell.
Absolutely. Bravo to you.
Joanie, how are you?
I'm fabulous. And you?
Yeah, we're good. It's not as early here as it is for you because you're in Arizona.
Yep. Mountain Standard Time Zone right now. Enjoying a nice cup of coffee to get the day started. But I'm generally an early bird. So this definitely suits me to be starting right now.
Perfect. Right. So, Joanie, I'm super happy to have you on the podcast because I've generally been following your channel for at least 3 years, I think.
Oh my gosh, no way.
Yeah. So, because one of the things I love doing, and I'm not much of a cook, or chef, I have to say, but one of the things I love doing is I love photographing flat lays.
Yeah.
And of course, a lot of flat lays are food related when you look around on Instagram and so on. And so I've taken a lot of inspiration from your videos in terms of lighting and composition and arranging things and colors and all of that kind of stuff. So I have learned a lot because I'm really a portrait photographer. So
okay.
I'm very comfortable photographing people, but flat lays is the other thing that I love doing.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh, I'm so flattered. Thank you.
So how did you first get started in food photography? It's a very specialist kind of area.
Yeah. I mean, I always think I feel like food photography is this strange little niche in the photography world. And they're like, what are they doing over there? This is a little goofy bunch. But it all started, my background, I've loved food ever since I was a kid. I didn't necessarily grow up in a foodie household, but I grew up at a time when the local television stations were doing a lot of cooking demos and the Food Network was really starting to gain notoriety. And I thought food was so interesting. And so started cooking when I was young. And so food's always just been really important to in culinary and dining out. And so I also then studied art history in my undergrad and really enjoyed my studio art classes. And so I've always had a passion for visual medium. And then eventually, as the internet and the blogging world really started to kind of come into its own, and we started to see food blogs really start to explode, I was living in New York and wanted to share the food I was experiencing and the things that I was eating with my family back home in Arizona. So I just started a blog and started taking pictures, had a little point and shoot camera. And, one thing leads to another. And I'm like, well, I like this blogging thing, but I really like this whole taking pictures thing, specifically taking pictures of food. Because to me, that was the only thing worth documenting, was what I was eating and the food that I was interested in. And so then fast forward to around 2014, I had a podcast interviewing local restaurants and chefs. And as a part of that, whenever I would feature somebody, I'd say, can I come into your restaurant and shoot one of your signature dishes so that I can pair that up with, the blog post. And then also at the time, Instagram was starting to really gain traction. And so, can I post it on Instagram? And so I can't remember what episode it was, but it was about 1.5 or 2 years into the podcasting journey, and went into a restaurant, shot the dishes, shared it. And they said, hey, can you come back in and, can we hire you to photograph our menu? Because, clearly you're a food photographer. And I'm like, what? Okay. You do that thing where you're like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. But you're like thinking to yourself, I have no idea what I'm doing. But it ended up going in, shooting their whole menu. And I remember that shoot, I was shooting on a little Sony a6000 and had the kit lens and didn't know what I was doing, but knew enough to be dangerous and to get some good shots, and I look back at those old shots and I say, hey, I had the eye, I knew enough to get myself started. And they were super happy with the images. And then that bug bit me that then it just kind of went all downhill from there. At that point, then I started seeing the opportunity to start working with other local restaurants and did a lot of networking and connecting with PR and marketing folks in the food space. But then at a certain point had kids and didn't necessarily want to be in the restaurants as much anymore. So saw the opportunity to then branch in working directly with food brands and working with companies to create online digital content. And so both video and stills. And then eventually I had local food photographer or food bloggers asking me, can you help me take better pictures of my food? I said, well, let's do some workshops. And I found that I was kind of answering the same questions over and over again. And I'm like, I just don't want to talk about aperture anymore. Like, I just need you to know what aperture is, and then we can go do other fun things. So that's when I created my YouTube channel and started sharing out videos as an effort to help the people I knew, so that then when I got into a workshop, I didn't have to explain the basics to them. But lo and behold, there was an audience waiting on YouTube who was hungry for that information. And so that's now where my primary focus is.
Well, it seems to me like you really have this this sort of perfect trinity of skills. Where I know you've got sort of a sales background, and I know you used to work in education as well.
Yep.
And then you combine that with your creative skills. It just makes the perfect package, it seems to me.
Yeah, it's so funny because, you look at your kind of life's journey, and I mean, I'm still young, so who knows where all of this goes and ends up and where the path leads. But, I remember thinking, in my mid 20s, my late 20s, early 30s, I, had spent good number of years in education and was kind of burned out on that and just didn't see a future for me personally in that. And so then I ended up in sales and working in restaurant point of sales. And I realized, okay, I'm good at this too. I can do this sales thing, but man, this is a swift departure from what I've been doing. Like, I've invested all this time and education in learning how to teach. And now here I am doing sales. And that seems kind of totally random and different. And then, kind of ended up getting burned out on that and left that, and then ended up in kind of this creative career. And of course, that love of food always being in the background. And so I remember thinking at a certain point before I'd found food photography, thinking like, what am I supposed to do with myself? Like, I've got all these super random skills. How will these things, did I waste my time? Was that for nothing? But now I look back and I think, gosh darn, every single one of those experiences, they all work together to create this very unique package that I think I'm so blessed to have been born into an age when the internet is here and that online education is so relevant that, had I been born 20 years ago, maybe I wouldn't be doing the same exact thing or using these skills in this same way. So I'm super grateful for it.
When you were talking about, you were taking a photo and said, oh, can you come back and photograph some more of our menu? It's really important because people hear these things that, they see people like yourself and they feel, amazing photographer, and they think that you've just forever been that way. They don't always necessarily believe that there was a time where you were just starting out as well. And that actually, to a certain extent, you for that want of a better phrase, you fake it before you make it. And, you said, no, I've got confidence in myself. I can take a good picture. I'm going to take that job and I'll learn as I go, more as we go. And people forget that. And I think it's really, really important that you had the confidence in yourself to just go, yeah, I'll see you next week.
Because those are the magical moments to me. Like, I think back over some of those critical growth moments from a professional standpoint that I always grew the most when I took a job that, like, in the back of my mind, I knew I could do it, but I was also kind of terrified because I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for that, right? Because we'll talk ourselves out of all sorts of stuff. We'll have 99 reasons to say no. But at the back, if you can always just kind of go, no, I can do this. And because also too, it's just food photography, right? Like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? It's not like we're shooting somebody's wedding and we can't redo something. Like, we can remake a cake or we can refund money. Like, it's not the end of the world. So I feel like when I think back to like my first time I was shooting for Knorr Bouillon, like the bouillon cubes. And I thought, oh man, this is like kind of the first big brand that I was shooting for. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. And I mean, I was sweating bullets and a nervous wreck. But after that, and seeing that the client was happy and that I was able to do it, that just like fuels that energy so much more to go try bigger and more scary things over time. And you find yourself, if you do enough of that over an amount of time, you'll suddenly go, wow, okay, how did I get here? This is incredible.
It's funny you mentioned something, about the more you do something, right, is one of the things that I want to start doing over what's left of our lockdown out here is to look at doing some street portraits of people from a safe distance and whatnot, obviously. But I'm generally quite an introverted person. I'm not necessarily the most outgoing person, but I am in certain circumstances. And that's one of those, speaking to strangers, where you don't. But I was just doing some research on it and, what's the best way to go about it? Still little tips and tricks, techniques, and particularly with dealing with the public like that. And the number one thing they say is go and find 10 people who reject you and say, no, I don't want you to do it. Just find 10. It's going to take you a long time to find 10, first of all. But when you do, you're hardened to it. It doesn't matter. It's nothing personal. So it's the more you do it, all those scary situations, the far easier it becomes, right?
Absolutely. So have you done that yet?
No. This is a yesterday, literally a yesterday thought process of mine. This is my project starting later this week.
So now you're held accountable. We're watching.
Yeah, exactly.
I tell you what, my 9-year-old daughter can give you some tips because she got into photography about a year ago, and she's decided that she wants to photograph dogs. She's a doggrapher, a photographer or something like that. Yeah. So we have some lakes locally here. We went down to the lakes and she said, we were talking, and I was like, okay, so what kind of thing would you like to photograph? She goes like, well, I don't like photographing people. I'm like, okay. All right, then. What would you like to photograph? She was like, I like photographing dogs. I'm just going to go and photograph that dog over there. And I'm like, okay, well, you're going to have to speak to the owner, though, or you can't just like walk up and, take a picture of some random dog. And without thinking, she would just walk up to any random person and very politely say, excuse me, may I please take a photograph of your dog? And of course, if you know any dog owners, if any like 9-year-old blonde girl asked them whether they could take a picture of the dog, they're just going to go, yeah, absolutely.
Of course.
Yeah. But it's just great. She has it doesn't enter into her thought process that she might be, I don't know, nervous about approaching somebody. She just goes up to somebody and says like, she's very polite. And she comes home with lots of dog pictures, which is great.
That's such a great point, though. Like, you think back and I haven't thought of this in a while, and I'm glad you've kind of like jogged this memory of things that I remember learning, in art classes in college, is the idea that like so much of our creativity is kind of buried under these levels of kind of these layers that we build over time as we become adults. And that if we can kind of peel back and get back to that place of, unashamed creativity that we had when we were a kid. You ask a kid to show you what they just made and they're like super excited. But for some reason, when we become self-conscious, when we become adults, and so, how we kind of peel back those layers and become cognizant of that and get inspired by what we see children do, I think it's very powerful.
What that really inspired me to as well is that thing generally, when you run a business and you need to put yourself out there and you need to approach potential clients. And it's, of course, a lot of, especially new photographers. I don't know if that's necessarily something that's only relevant to creative people. I think it's probably just mostly people who feel kind of nervous about, taking the first step, picking up the phone, sending that email, making that first contact. And I was watching my daughter and I'm thinking like, she has no hangups about this whatsoever. No. Why am I sitting at home thinking, shall I call that company to see whether they want headshots? Forget it. I should basically send the email. And that's the thing. It's like, sometimes we can learn a lot just by looking at kids and how, like, what's the word? Uninhibited they are about certain things, Well,
I hope she finds a great future in dogography.
Well, she's that's what she's into. So we'll see. Watch this space. That's what I'm saying. So Joanie, you've obviously eventually you transitioned onto YouTube. When you started your YouTube channel, The Bite Shot, which is all about food photography on a creative level on one hand, but also on sort of on a business level on the other hand.
Mm-hmm.
Did you already have a lot of photography experience when you first started that channel, or was that sort of another kind of, well, I'm just going to get started, I'm going to learn how to do it as I go along type of a thing?
I mean, I feel like when I started the channel, I felt like I knew a lot. But now looking back, there was a lot I didn't know. And I have learned so much over the course of the last, we're going on 4 years now coming up. And, I feel like one of the things that's very powerful sometimes to propel us forward is that sort of naive perspective of, especially when we're thinking we know more than we do. But I think, having that openness to learn was important because, definitely, the first couple videos, I knew again, kind of the basics, the exposure triangle, how to diffuse light and some of those basic principles. But what was so magical and so powerful, and I think has helped me to grow so significantly in my skills in such a relatively short amount of time is that the internet shows up, people start asking questions. And, my favorite one is like this was I don't remember exactly where this was in terms of the timeline, but somebody's, well, what do you think about extension tubes? I'm like, what the heck is an extension tube? I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Get on Google, go research it. Oh, okay, let's go buy some extension tubes. Let's play with it. And then voila, a couple weeks later, we got a video, and I feel like part of sort of that secret sauce, especially when this channel was sort of beginning, because it is definitely geared towards the beginner audience, the folks who are getting started, who, just don't even know where to start. Because, there's plenty of experienced photographers who show up on the channel and go, well, you can do blah, blah, blah different. I'm like, yeah. But, it's great for that beginner. And I think that having that sort of being slightly ahead of the audience, kind of where I was so powerful because I still understood the struggles and still remembered the things that were difficult or hard to understand and be able to break it down in a way that was very relatable. I have to continually, the further I get along my journey, have to continue to take myself back to that mental space and that place of remembering, okay, yeah, this is not something that everybody just knows. You don't just walk out of the womb and understand what certain things mean. So yeah, I mean, it's been incredibly fun and it's so crazy. Again, my husband too just cracks up. He's like, I don't know when this photography thing ended up in our lives, but clearly it's taken over and why you have all this gear and all these things, but that's what happens, I guess.
Yeah, I tell you what, these are the exact words that my wife uses pretty much every day. Like, How did that happen?
Yeah. How did we get here? Because we say too, we think back, we've been together 20 years now. And he says, had you told me 20 years ago that you'd end up being a photographer, I would not have seen that coming. But it makes sense. Again, the pairing of all these different interests and that I love art, but I have no patience for painting. So, photography makes sense.
But if somebody said to you like 20 years ago, this is what you're going to be doing, like on a digital platform that's like somewhere in the cloud, like some weird thing that everybody was like, what?
I know, right? I mean, that any of this exists and this is all still so new. That's why I'm so excited too, because I feel like, I mean, the internet and digital media, it's still the Wild West. It's so in its infancy. And so to see where this is all going to be in 5, 10, 20 years, what that's going to look like, I can't wait.
Well, see, the thing, I mean, I think, I speak for Nick as well when I say that, the reason why we started this podcast, as all of our tens of listeners will know, is, we started this podcast right at the beginning of the first lockdown, and it's a direct result of the pandemic because we, like I always say, we found ourselves with all of our contracts canceled and not much work, and and we had to do something creative to keep things going, and so we decided, seeing that we talk about photography all the time anyway, we might as well record it, and there must be some other nerd out there who might, might like to listen to it. Who knows?
Absolutely.
But the fascinating thing for us really. Is that here we are 47 weeks later, we're still doing it, and in the process, not only because one of the things we thought in the very beginning was like, okay, so if we do this every week, like, what are we going to talk about? Like, and like every week. I mean, if we're doing this like for an hour, it's going to be pretty repetitive. But I think, we've over the last 47 years, just nearly a year, we managed to speak to so many really interesting people, from all different walks of photography, and we've learned something every week. Like, 1 week we get a chance to speak to a wildlife photographer, and then we speak to you, food photography, and then there's a headshot photographer, and it's like every time you speak to somebody, you go like, I didn't know this, wicked.
And then interesting tidbit.
Yeah, and then it becomes part of the. Yeah, I did a shoot the other day actually, which was kind of like a flat lay shoot, and I was like, I was battling with lighting and going through the usual thought process. I think, it's like, oh, should it be window light, or should I use the north window for this? Is it overcast enough? Or should I get the 6-7 foot softbox out or whatever, right? And and although it wasn't really a food flat lay, I kind of thought, all right, I'm going to check out Joanie's channel just to see how she does that. And then that helped me to create this image in the end.
Awesome. How did it turn out?
Well, all will be revealed next week.
Ooh, very exciting. That's quite a teaser.
Yes. It's also a teaser for Nick, who hasn't actually finished his thing yet. But we get challenged by our guests occasionally. Sometimes we challenge our guests, sometimes we get challenged. So we a few weeks ago, one of our guests, Donna, did it. Challenge us to a 5-room challenge, which is hilarious fun. Basically, you pick an object from 5 rooms in your house. So one object from the bedroom, from the living room, the bathroom, whatever, the hallway, whatever. And then you create a photograph out of these 5 objects.
Huh.
Yeah. And
that is an interesting challenge.
Yeah. It's how did it go for you, Nick?
Harder than I thought it was going to be, I have to say. I ended up doing something which is different. I'm just going to leave it there. It's different. It's definitely not what you would have expected me to have done. Right. And it's definitely different from what I understand about your photo, which is great. It's what I love about these.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing. I mean, the thing about creating this, and this, this totally applies to food photography, I guess, is that when you have these different things, and you have your centerpiece, whatever it is that is the main focus of your photograph, a cupcake or whatever it may be, the main dish, and then you just accessorize it almost with all these other things. It's that I find that really challenging. Yeah. To bring all of these other elements into that. Did that take you a long time to work out how to do that, or is that something that came very naturally to you?
Oh no, that's definitely a challenging part of the food photography experience, and it's certainly one of the things that I get a lot of questions about, and one of the most in-demand topics is the prop styling part of the equation, because it really does. It adds to both the aesthetic of the image, how it complements and works with the food. It also informs, camera angles. It informs so many of the different, technical decisions. But then too, just finding the props that really speak to the style you're looking to create or the mood, And so this is why too, if you get into food photography and you start doing this in any sort of serious fashion, you find yourself ending up with all of these props. And it becomes a problem, a good problem. But yeah, I mean, that is definitely, it's a challenging part of the process, and I think that it develops over time, and your eye for what is going to work, and being able to kind of think through those things in your mind, because you've seen enough and you become exposed to a lot of it. I think one of the things that really helps me and helped me too to really cultivate an idea around what props I liked. I mean, certainly the internet is great, and there's so much out there as far as seeing what other people are doing and Instagram accounts, things like that. But things can start to get a little monotonous in that realm. And so I find, lots of great cookbooks can be helpful because you're going to definitely have like the editorial team behind that. And you're going to have like they're professional prop stylists. There are people that specialize just in the props. And so, looking at images that were created with that kind of expertise and, advertising, magazines, things like that. And so you can really gain some interesting perspectives. But I feel like, one of the things that really just unlocked a lot for me in terms of the character of images, a lot of times is very dependent both on the backdrop that you're selecting, as well as the props. And the first couple of times that I spent they're not cheap, but, being able to find some great ceramicists and potters and people who are making handmade plates and bowls and dishes, and you get those pieces that have like real character in them, and texture and interest, that suddenly you go, oh, wow, that like this has just transformed the whole scene in comparison to something that's, I have plenty of stuff that's, from the mass produced stores, and that's great too. But just having a couple of those little kind of character pieces can really add a lot to the image.
Every time you go to like, let's say a flea market or like a car boot sale or something like that, do you find yourself just looking at things going, that would make a good prop? I think I'm going to pick that up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The eyes are always open, right? Always paying attention. In terms of, I've definitely gotten some great things at the local flea markets and antique stores, but I feel like there's also, I do have this very burning desire at some point to end up in the UK and in Europe, because I feel like I watch food photographers and prop stylists from your part of the world, and they go in and they find these like gorgeous things. And I'm like, we don't have that here. Like there's just not enough history in Phoenix, Arizona to support those kind of props. And so I always lament thinking, oh, if I just had those kind of, so I'm really good at navigating Etsy and eBay. So for the folks, and I buy a lot of stuff from overseas that I purchase and pay god awful shipping for. But you got to do what you got to do. There's other advantages to living here. So, but I do have British Airways points saved up. So once the pandemic is over, I will be making my way to the UK so that I can go raid some serious antique shops.
Fantastic.
Well, we're just outside London, so you know where we are. We'll show you around.
Fabulous. I love it.
I've got a little bit of a thing for plates, right? I love a great plate and something that looks fantastic or different, and I know you very often, for many years, you pretty much only used round plates. Is that right? But you've kind of over recent months moved into using more sort of square and rectangular style plates. What prompted you to kind of make that? It sounds like a small thing, but I suspect actually is a bigger thing for you than perhaps people give it credit for. What kind of made that transition? Why do you start introducing that?
Well, I did a cookbook shoot where it was very explicit from the art director that we should not have, there would be no square plates, no rectangle. It was only round plates. Like this was like, there were 5 cardinal sins on the, mood board. Like, do not incorporate slate, do not incorporate square plates. Like, but it's very specific, which is great. I love a very specific art director. That is incredibly helpful. But I felt like, anytime that you're limited and you're like, oh, I'm going to go branch out and do something wild, right? Because the little rebel inside of you is like, oh, no. Okay, now we need to go do what we want to do. But I think too, just from a trend perspective, and two, I think, certainly square plates a lot of times, especially kind of like those more like what you've kind of see in restaurants and kind of harken back to food photography of like the 1990s and kind of before that, rounder edges are a bit more organic. And so just maybe a kind of that softer feel. But I feel like, the trends are always changing and morphing, right? So we're maybe seeing a bit more in terms of angular and those kind of shapes going on. But I think too, shooting anything that is square or rectangle, especially long rectangles, it can pose a lot of challenges just in terms of how to approach that dish. Certainly the overhead perspective, I think, makes it easier. So that's why, you can kind of frame that up a little easier. But if you're going to shoot, something that's a long rectangle from, that kind of 3/4, that, 45-degree angle, it's going to be a little harder to really get a sense of balance. And, am I just at the right angle? Like there's a bit more nuance there, and a little less forgiveness just in terms of the geometry of the situation. So I think it is a unique challenge in that regard, but it's a lot of fun. So yeah, I kind of have been keeping my eyes open for more square and rectangular props.
I see. My feelings about rectangular square plates is I always think like who eats from like square plates at home? Like if you have kids and you go like, yo, Stevie, load the dishwasher. Like rectangular plates are not good. That's not a good idea. I mean, that's not gonna end well at all. Yeah. So you started. If we just roll back a little bit, because you said in the beginning you started originally in food blogging, and then you went on to running a podcast at the time, and then you sort of moved on to YouTube as a platform. Is it? Do you think that there may be other platforms that you may get interested in?
I feel like it's hard to say. I think that one of the things that's been helpful to me in building the Bite Shot and the YouTube and Instagram audience is that I was just very kind of narrow in terms of not trying to be all the things on all the platforms, because, people go, oh, you should really start to really focus on Pinterest and get more Pinterest content out there. And that'll really, help fuel everything. And I'm like, I'm sure it would, but I only have so many hours in the day, and I want to put my primary energy towards the platforms where I get the most energy and the most excitement over. I did think about, because, I podcasted for a better part of 2 years and then transitioned into my first YouTube channel before the Bite Shot, which was more just creating cooking videos, which kind of one of the things that inspired that change from podcasting to video is realizing I do have the ability to talk in front of a camera, which not everybody has, and is sort of a barrier to entry in the YouTube and the video content creation space. And so understanding that and thinking, if I can do this and not everybody can, that this is an opportunity to do that. Now, that first channel didn't really go anywhere, but again, I chalk that up to a really great learning experience of learning how to do video, learning how to film myself and all these different things. And two, what was interesting is, I forget exactly how many videos, it was 200 some odd videos on that channel that I produced. And one of the videos was a video about how to do food photography. But I remember thinking at the time, like, oh, wouldn't that be interesting if there was a food photography YouTube channel? But I thought, I'd never have enough to talk about. I'd make a couple videos and that'd be it. And, lo and behold, here we are. And I'm like, there's plenty more videos still to be made now, almost 4 years in. So yeah, it was definitely kind of that moment of realizing, okay, if there's something that I can uniquely do that not everybody can do, I should leverage that. And I don't entirely know how that inspiration came to me or where that came from, but I'm certainly glad it did.
Yeah. That must have been a really steep learning curve, because obviously, creating a YouTube channel and making videos and filming yourself and then editing it. And, apart from that, of course, because it's about food photography, you got to also prepare all the food and like think about recipes and like think about ingredients and change all of that up. And it seems, that's such a massively steep learning curve to handle all of these things. That must have, and I know you had small children at the time as well. So, I find it difficult to do about just about anything with having small children around. How did you manage that?
Looking back over the last 5 years, it's been, massive loads of work. But I think that, when you find something that like that little thing inside of you is just like, I'm not going to give up on this. Like there's just that little nagging thing. And I remember there's plenty of times on that channel and on the current channel when something would go wrong. Like I remember specifically, there was a video I was creating and it was, I believe it was a Christmas roast. So it was like something that required a lot of, pre-planning, preparation. I mean, a roast, you can't just like throw a roast together. And so I remember though, I was getting ready to film and I was filming at night because I was usually filming after the kids went to bed. And so this was like late night hours, talk about like the hustle being real. But I remember I'd finished everything up and then I was getting ready to go, transfer all the files, but I was like super tired. And then somehow as I was like setting, because I was just setting up in my home kitchen and then tearing it down every time. So it wasn't like there was just this setup I could always walk into. And I just remember I lost the memory card. I'd done all these hours of work of filming this roast and filming all the B-roll and doing all this. And then I couldn't find the memory card. And I'm like, I remember sobbing and telling my husband, like, this is the sign that I'm not supposed to do it. And, the dramatic and the tears and all that. And then, I gathered myself and then I remembered, no. Like if I can push through this, if I can, take this as a sign that, whenever you run into that roadblock, just the other side of that roadblock is some sort of payoff, some sort of good will come of this if I just persist a little bit longer. And so sure enough, that ended up being a super popular video on that channel, even though, again, that channel didn't necessarily turn into anything specific in its own right. It was still something that propelled me to continue to make videos because I thought, there is an audience here. Oh, these are some of the things I'm doing well. But that's just always something that I kind of remind myself whenever I hit a wall, whenever I run into something that I'm like, this is the sign that I should stop. That's always the sign to me that I need to just push a little bit further because the payoff is going to be the other side. Because most people do give up. Most people will hit that and say, all right, I give up. This is too hard. I'm going to, go back to whatever's comfortable and that feels familiar. But if you just push that a little bit further, that's where the good stuff is.
I also feel like it's a really important part of self-development is to come up against those roadblocks and solving these issues, because the next time you hit a similar problem, you already know how to solve it because you've already experienced it. And I'm pretty sure
I've never lost another memory card since. I know exactly where my memory cards are at all times.
Exactly. And I think, we all had to go through that at one point, it's, normally, of course, under normal circumstances in a, non-covert kind of situation, Nick and me would record this in the same space, so we'd be on the same set. But seeing that, we're still in the middle of a national lockdown, or actually we're coming to the end of the lockdown now, but we're still in our respective homes. But there's a lot more to take care of because Nick usually does all the technical stuff, and I, just show up and talk. But so, that's not quite, but it's that's like I have to constantly remind myself, right? I got to turn the audio on. I got to record the audio, then I've got to make sure the lights are on, and then do all this. Just a lot of things that can potentially go wrong.
Well, and it is too, when we talk about then doing commercial work or work for clients, and, you start to think about how can I make this production more effective and more efficient? Is it really then it's just in terms of getting more bodies involved so that you can be more efficient and you don't have to drag something out over several days. You can get it done a lot quicker if you have, somebody who's an expert prop stylist, if you have somebody who's an expert food stylist, if you have an assistant to help you run the lights, if you have a digitech to make sure that the files are doing what they're supposed to and help keep track of all of that. And, so all those different people, that's where we can really start to scale those kinds of things and make it much more efficient, and I think about that just in terms of the content that I create that, I have since started working with a video editor, and just how much that has helped to both elevate the quality of the videos, just because the editing is now being done by somebody who does that all the time and is really good at it and knows how to do things in Premiere that I don't know how to do and I don't need to learn how to do because he's great at that. And so that really helps to free me up then to, invest more time in other things. But now I'm seeing too, I'm like, okay, now this is then where we get an additional camera person because I'm still running around, turning on all the things and checking all the things. And, so that's again, just additional time, that how much more could I produce and how much more efficient and just better quality and how much more I would enjoy it. Because do I enjoy running around, turning on all the cameras and making sure I've got the angles and, oh, am I still in focus?
No.
And, I mean, all those things. But, I think that comes over time. And I'm just so happy, though, that I did start out and I have done all of it all myself for so long. Because now as I hire people, I know what I'm looking for and I know if they're doing it right and I know if they're not doing it right and what's important to me, so that then as I build that team, I know exactly what it is they're doing and I can be so excited when I don't have to do it.
Yeah. The other thing about that really is that it also makes for a much more relaxing experience. Because I remember the first time I did a volume headshot shoot, whilst previously I've been doing headshots, of individuals, or sometimes it would be like 2 people. But I remember the first time I got a call, it's like, oh, can you come in this afternoon and shoot 50 people? And I'm like, 50 people.
Whoa.
And I've got how much time? I got 4 hours. Oh, okay. That's including setup and breakdown. I'm like, okay. And then, of course, and all of this runs to you, and you go, man, this is going to be the most stressful experience you could possibly imagine, because, I've got so much time for each individual person, and I've got to, they've got to pick the photos and blah, blah, and all that kind of stuff. So, and then I thought, like, no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hire an assistant, and I'm going to get somebody else to line them all up, to make sure they're in the right place at the right time, and then I'm going to get somebody else on a laptop, taking care of the, of the person. Once they're taking the photo, they can choose the shot that they want in the end. That can all happen whilst the next person comes in, and I can be relaxed behind the camera, and I can, build that little relationship, that little 3-minute relationship, and get people to relax in front of the camera, and I can focus on that. And as an end result, it was a extremely relaxing experience for me, and for the client. And as an end result of that, we actually managed to expand our business into that quite a lot, because it then became known that we could handle those kind of situations quite easily. And that was literally like a light bulb moment where I was stressing out like there was no tomorrow, over this job, and I'm thinking, I'm stupid. I need somebody else to do this for me. It's going to cost me. Okay, fair enough, but it's worth it. Because,
But that's a key moment, right? Is because you do have that little thought in the back of your mind, like, oh, this is going to cost me money. If I just did it myself, I could keep that money. But you see that, that spending money ultimately, if you kind of take that long view as opposed to that short term, very immediate, like that long view is, oh, this is going to turn into, I can continue to get hired. This is going to expand my network. This is going to be well worth that investment. And I think those are those decisions, again, just like taking jobs that you feel like you're not completely ready for. It's the same thing, at that same sort of feeling of, it's like, I'd rather not hire somebody, but like just thinking about how much this is going to make my life easier and the better quality product at the end of the day, always do that.
And in the long run, of course, because it does allow you to take on these kind of jobs, in the future, it basically means you can charge more, you can quote accordingly, and so it just opens your business up to a lot more opportunities. That's what I've found. That's certainly, it's come in handy, for me directly in the conference world, where very often, I'd be glad if I only had to shoot 50 people, but it's usually 200 to 400 people at this conference. They're all in the country just at the same time in the same space. And then it's the thing of like, well, seeing that they're all here, we might as well do headshots so they all look the same. But there's 400 people and you got a day.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
and it's like, okay, well then I need not one assistant but 2 or 3, and then but you get it rolling that way, and it's
that's awesome.
Yeah. So but that was, again, it was like a learning experience, literally from starting just shooting one person to then taking a chance and taking a step, jumping off the cliff, and just see what happens, basically.
Yeah.
Now, I also want to talk to you about your new book, because you're about to release a brand new book. So we've got to talk about that, because when I saw that, I just thought, I love it. This is just such an awesome idea. So the book is called Picture Perfect Food, Master the Art of Food Photography. And it really goes, I mean, it kind of, obviously it makes sense. If you look at it in conjunction with your YouTube channel, it makes perfect sense. But yeah, I love the concept. So tell us a little bit about the concept.
Yeah. Well, I was approached by a publisher who said, "Oh, have you ever thought of writing a book?" And I'm like, "Writing a book? Oh, that sounds very intense." And turns out it is a very intense process. So, but I thought it's interesting because I definitely think that we talked about platforms and mediums, and I do think that again, kind of part of the magic of my teaching is the ability to teach on camera and communicate via video. But fortunately, I had great English teachers in high school and, in college. And so I feel like I've got some solid writing skills. And I thought this would be an interesting way too, to just connect with people in a different way and explore food photography and teach food photography in a way that I haven't before, that brings people in that, it may just change their ability to see things in a different way. And so we were kind of batting around different ideas, and I got inspired by, there's different books out there that'll take you through here's a little lesson for every week of the year, or, one a day sort of thing. And I thought, what if I did that for food photography? 52 lessons, one lesson for each week of the year. And then some sort of personal challenge, so that whatever that lesson is, that then you're putting that into practice, and that could be applicable too. Because, knowing that I wanted to create something, at least in communication with this publisher, that we wanted to create something that was applicable for, anybody who's, shooting on a cell phone, but also somebody who's more experienced and, knows a lot about cameras. That I think that no matter where we're at in our journey, we can always return to certain lessons, and maybe certain lessons in your head, but then that challenge of revisiting that and thinking about that in a different way, that we know aperture at this point, like the back of our hand, but have we maybe explored it from a different perspective or thought about it differently? And so that's really what this book does, is kind of prompts you with different activities that they're grouped into 7 different kind of main chapters. So there's the chapter all about different camera settings, and then there's a chapter about light, and so lessons inside of the concept of light, and then moving into composition, which is definitely a huge part of photography in general, and very something a lot of folks want to learn more about in terms of food photography. And then moving into prop styling, so kind of that topic that we were talking about earlier, that's a tricky thing, but teaching about prop styling, and then food styling, and then kind of rounding it out with more of the kind of personal inspiration and getting ideas and staying inspired, and keep on going when the going gets tough. And so that's sort of the scope of the book, and it really leads you through all of that. So somebody could, in theory, start it one day, and then a year later have executed 52 different images that really kind of up their game. Because I do, we see in the photography realm in general, you do these 365 challenges or different personal challenges, and that's where you can, in your own personal work, sort of explore and get creative and get new ideas.
Those kind of challenges, like the 365 or 52, an image a week challenges. And I've seen a lot of people have been doing those over the lockdown here in the UK. We were seriously locked down for the first time in April last year for about 3 months, and then again in November, and now it's the third time around since Christmas. Been literally shut in the houses, and you got to find things to do. It's not good for anybody to just be shut indoors. And a lot of we set up a Zoom group. I was just almost a photography therapy group, or call it, or whatever. It's basically just a Zoom call where people could get on and hook up every Wednesday afternoon or something like that. And we could just talk about photography related issues. Somebody's had no motivation or something, we'll talk about that, and we'll find different ideas and come up with creative things that somebody could do around the house, in the garden, or whatever. And the one thing that became very clear very quickly was that just by doing something every day, taking a photo every day, or creating a flat lay every week, or whatever it is, you just can't help but get better at it. It's just it's just learning how to play an instrument. If you practice 10 minutes every day, you will get better. You just can't help it. It's just going to happen. So that's why when I first read about your book, and I thought this is such a great idea. You have a challenge, you have a week, and then you have something that progresses you further. Is exactly how Nick can be also teach music, so that's so hence, which is where we're from an educational point. This makes perfect sense. This is exactly how we structure our lesson plans. You teach guitar.
Yeah. And I'm excited too, because there's a lot that's in the book that, through the book writing process and working with the publisher, who is it was so much fun to work with them and collaborate with them, because, working with them, the folks who I was interacting with there aren't photographers. I mean, I feel like in 2021, everybody in some way, shape, or form is a photographer, right? Because we've all got phones in our pockets. And so that just kind of comes with the territory. But it was great to be working with and collaborating with people who weren't photographers, who could look at that from a perspective of, does this make sense? Because I wanted to make it very inclusive for kind of all experience levels, but then sending it to other friends who are experienced food photographers specifically, and being, that they were reading things and going, oh, I never thought about that. And as I was writing the book, I didn't share it with the audience. I kept it very under wraps until we were ready to, get into the pre-sale process and everything. But I was constantly polling the audience about things that were challenges for them. And so a lot of that is infused into the book too. Like there was, when I was working on the food styling chapter, and I was going through all the things and thinking about what are the most challenging foods, like meats. Meats are always hard to photograph. I don't care who you are, how to prepare them and how to set them up and how to do different things to make it, a little bit more forgiving in the photography process. Thinking about frozen foods, frozen things are always hard, so popsicles and ice creams, things like that. And then I pulled the audience down and I said, okay, guys, what is like the most challenging food to photograph? Just Instagram poll. And like far and away, worse than meats, worse than, flat foods, worse than drinks, all these other things that to me are so much more challenging. Everybody's saying soups and salads. And I'm like, really? Soups and salads? Okay, this is good. So, because again, what's challenging for me or what comes easy for me may not be the case for others. So really then taking a critical look and deep diving into, okay, where are the challenges with soups and what are some of the strategies that I put into place? And then, pretty much all of the lessons throughout the book have an image that I created. So I did not only all the writing, but also all of the photography for the book. And it's all brand new images created specifically for the book, is hoping to, because I remember when I was first getting started and started taking food photography seriously, one of the things that really helped, I think, propel my skills was in finding other images and sort of recreating those images. And anytime I see people do that with images that I've created on my YouTube, lessons and things like that, I take that as such a badge of honor, knowing that I've inspired somebody to action and to go do that. And so it's very explicitly in the front of the book, feel free to recreate these images, or if you like something in an image, take that and run with that and turn that into your own particular flavor, or put your own spin on it, or straight up recreate it. That's great too, because I think you learn so much, especially when you're getting started, in that process of going, okay, well, how did they get that to do that? And kind of that struggle and that experimentation process. So I can't wait to get this in people's hands.
I find this really, this is really something that I find very difficult about photographing food in general is, this is typically example. You go to a restaurant, you go to a fast food place, like McDonald's or something, and you look at the Big Mac or something, or the burger on the photo, and you open the box and you're like, that doesn't look anything like it.
No, it's not that.
Yeah, it's not that at all. It's
truth in advertising.
Yeah, exactly. But I find that really fascinating, and a lot of the things that personally I love watching are things about how to prepare certain things, like how to prepare a bottle, when it's this typical beer bottle kind of shot where you have pearls of condensation running down the side and all that kind of stuff, until you realize that that's not actually it's not condensation at all. It's just all it's just made to look like that, but it's actually solid. And I find it extremely satisfying and interesting, to learn how to do these very specific things.
I also, I actually think they're also the things that put people off trying food photography in the first place, because they hear that, oh yeah, but that's fake and this is that, there's pins in that, there's all sorts of things like that going on. And I think that does, particularly if you're a newer photographer, puts them off potentially doing that. Think, well, I'm only going to take something that's like an iPhone snap or whatever. But you don't always have to use that stuff, right? Particularly when you're getting started. They're for very specific reasons. It doesn't mean you always have to use them. So, I don't shoot food at all. So how would you suggest I or one of our listeners who are thinking about doing food photography, how would you suggest we go about getting started with it and feeling good about doing it too?
Well, my suggestion is always to go with food that you can put in place and that isn't going to change on you. Don't try to do all the things all at once. I've got a lighting course that I've been updating and working on. And one of the things that I was very specific about in terms of creating all the lessons for that course was that all we're shooting throughout the whole thing, for the most part, is all produce, like fresh produce that just looks good. Like I don't have to do anything to it. I don't have to manipulate it. A pear is beautiful, right? There's a reason that all those still life painters were painting fruits, because they're beautiful and they can sit for a long time. And so that's always kind of that recommendation. And go get just a couple beautiful pieces of fruit or some lettuce or something just with some interesting texture or color, and then just explore that subject. The second that we try to think, okay, I'm going to make mom's famous casserole and I'm going to do all these things, and then you kind of get bogged down in the food preparation process. So really simplify that by just picking more simple subjects. And honestly, some of my favorite images that I've ever shot, have minimal props, have minimal, other components to it. It's just about really capitalizing on what's the most beautiful part of that particular food. Slicing a lemon, what's the most beautiful part of the lemon, and how can we position the light to maybe create some glow through the inside of that lemon. There's a lot of different ways to explore those kind of very simple subjects. And two, in those kind of situations, then too, I think that it does help to have a longer focal length, so that we can really zero in and just focus on that one thing, as opposed to I feel like we just get so overwhelmed by the styling process, as opposed to really studying what I think are some of the more important parts of the food photography process, is really paying attention to the lighting and how light is affecting the surface of that subject, and how the shadows are being created, and creating these little specular highlights, and, really extracting all those things. So whenever possible and whenever you're practicing, don't go try to make a Thanksgiving dinner. Just stick to the beautiful produce.
Use what you already know, right? You already know a little bit about lighting. You already know something about focal length. It's about taking what you know and applying it to this specific scenario, right? But that's photography in general. And I think people can see food photography as unreachable, because there are people out there like you who are so fantastic at what they do that they think, I'm never going to be able to create that. That's never going to happen. You've got to start somewhere, though, and this is why your idea about your book and the way you structure it and the way you've over the year. This is why learning things in that way is so important. It's so important. And in a previous life, I used to do training as well, and exactly how I used to do it with people I was training there. Same principles.
Well, don't you think too that, when you sort of cross over into other disciplines in the photography realm, that then you come back to whatever's your home base? I know that when I started shooting more portraits, because, I started doing cookbooks and needed to shoot author headshots, or, in restaurants, photographing the chefs. So learning about, watching all the, portrait photographer YouTubes and reading all the books and things like that. And I'm like, light is still light. Modifiers are still modifiers. All these same things exist. We just have to think about what's going to flatter that subject, and thinking about that. But then taking some of the inspiration and those ideas. And, before shooting portrait lighting, I hadn't really ever used a kicker, or I hadn't used a rim light. And okay, can I bring that now back into food photography? And, maybe it's not going to be the same editorial style as I'm used to doing, but maybe I'm going to throw something different into this, because now I'm seeing food photography as a portrait photographer. And I think that vice versa, if you're a portrait photographer suddenly seeing food photography, it's going to inform some decisions and change some things, I think, or at least give you some new ideas in shooting portraits.
Yeah, absolutely right. We spoke about this in last week's episode as well.
Yeah.
Nick and myself, during the whole lockdown thing, but we couldn't photograph people or other humans because for some reason that was frowned upon at that point. We decided to go out and shoot cars. And so neither Nick nor myself really had very much experience with photographing cars, but we had, in fact, that was inspired by a guest on the show who was an automotive photographer, and told us about this technique of light painting. We were like, oh, okay, well, that's a cool thing to do. We can do that, and so we went out and did that, and although we were kind of happy with the car itself, we just, there was just something missing. There was just something, and we couldn't put our finger on it until we spoke to another guest, and he said, if you have trouble with the background, just think of car photography like it's landscape photography with a car in it. And we immediately went, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Of course, let's think about the location first, and once we find a really cool spot, then let's just think, what car can we put into that so that it looks cool? And then that totally changed the photography completely, because then things started tied together. Previous to that, we had literally just focused on the car itself. And, shooting it, I think, in my backyard at one point, and it just really didn't, it's like a Tesla in front of some rundown garages. It didn't look good at all.
Yeah.
So
it's incredible.
So I feel like you're absolutely right. It's you learn from everything that you do, and it ultimately all comes back together and informs the next thing that you do from then on in. Was there ever anything that you prepared for a photo shoot that went totally, completely, and utterly wrong?
Oh, all the time. I can't pinpoint one. I mean, it still happens. There's things that I will, personal work or different projects, and I'll be like, okay, let's do this today. And then I make that. I'm like, oh, that's not going to work. I mean, for sure. All the time. I can't pinpoint any in particular. But yeah, there's a lot of images on my hard drives that have never seen the light of day. So
you must be cooking a lot. I mean, when you're prepping all these different things.
Yeah, I haven't been quite as much recently because I've been more in production phase on a lot of other projects and things like that. But for sure, in the process of doing the book, I focused on the writing first because I can't multitask very well. I'm very good at focusing on one project at a time. So did all the writing and then did all the photography to make sure that the photos would then match with the content of the book. And so, certainly those, it was 6 weeks of nonstop photography and nonstop cooking. So there's definitely a lot of cooking going on in that time frame. Absolutely. Which some of it we ate and some of it we were like, I have poked and prodded at that for a couple of hours. Nobody wants to eat that. So,
so your book is going to be available from April onwards. Is that right? In the United States, and then it'll be available in Europe, probably the month after that, I would guess, huh?
Yep, it takes, apparently there's boats involved. I'm like, I thought there were airplanes, but apparently they have to go via cargo ship, and who even knows? I don't know. But it'll release April 20th here in the US, and then otherwise worldwide, UK and Europe will start to see it around the May time frame. But it is fortunately also available via all sorts of different retailers between Amazon and Book Depository is great for those who are international. We are currently in negotiations to make sure that it's available in India because there are a lot of folks, a lot of food photographers excited about the book. So we're currently trying to figure out the distribution on that side of things. Again, fortunately, having a great publisher solves a lot of those problems. So, but the pandemic also complicates things. But hopefully now we're on the downhill slope of that, we'll be able to get it in everybody's hands. And then around June timeframe, once everybody's received the book, there is a little special code on page 9 of the book, little link that people can go to sign up for a free workshop, private workshop just for people who own the book, special link there. And so then throughout June, we'll be doing those workshops. So we can do those in real time and experience the book together.
Nick, I feel some more challenges coming on there. You know, between you and me.
It's like you're reading my mind from your house.
I knew it. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's going to be interesting. Absolutely. That's going to be very cool. Yeah, we're definitely going to be, I think, yeah, you'll be seeing more of that on this show. You know, if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, you know, make sure you go ahead and check out our YouTube channel, where you can not only listen to our sultry voices, but also see our beautiful faces in full Technicolor. All you have to do is go to www.youtube.com/camera shake. And once you're there, why don't you just do us a favor and hit that subscribe button, ring the bell sort of thing, you know, whatever YouTube would say, you know, just do that. It'd be awesome. Anyway, so, now, I was wondering, I know I picked up something by watching some of your recent videos, and I know that for years you've been shooting Canon. This is like the technical photographer kind of conversation.
This is the nerd
right here.
moment,
That's
right?
the nerd moment. Yes,
You've taken my question away, Kay. I was intrigued by this.
So I know you've been shooting Canon for a long while, and you've recently changed to Nikon.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the motivation behind that?
So my very, very first DSLR was actually a Nikon D3000, which had a very sad end when it got dropped on a concrete floor and never recovered. And this was when I was first starting out and got to know a local photographer. And he said, this was right as like Sony's mirrorless game was just really starting to heat up. And he said, you need to go get a Sony mirrorless camera. It's going to change your life. Now, at the time, again, I was still shooting in auto. So to say that was going to change my life wasn't, but it was fine. Like I went and got the Sony A6000, but you know, then I started to watch as I started to YouTube and I started to, you know, create content. I noticed like everybody's shooting Canon. I gotta do what everybody else is doing. Right. So I went and got a Canon 7DD. That's where I really built my business and really dug into that camera. Then upgraded to the 5D Mark IV, shot that for the better part of, 2.5, 3 years. But one of the things that I always found a challenge, you know, I felt like over the course of my YouTube channel and everything I'd done, like I felt like I was really in control of my images, was really in control of my lighting. But the one thing that just always felt a little off in editing was that just the reds, orange, and yellows for me were just like a little too much, right? Like for me personally, in my own personal taste, and I could just never get the oranges, reds, and yellows, those warmer tones to read the way I wanted. And I thought, well, maybe it's just, again, it's something I'm doing wrong or something I need to change, whatever. So I was having this conversation with a friend who he's a commercial celebrity photographer, and he does a lot of crazy ad campaigns. And he is way too smart about cameras. Like we have conversations and I'm like, I can't even process what you're saying. But I was lamenting this with him and I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And he said, well, Joanie, you might want to try Nikon, because here's the little thing is there is a slight difference in terms of the way that the colors are rendered in the different camera systems. And this was like news to me. And I'm thinking, really? So he said, I forget exactly which of his Nikons he loaned me, but he said, take this one home, go play with it and see how it goes. And, there is a lot of warm tones in food. Like a lot of food is warm toned. And so I took it home and I'm like, well, gosh darn. Like I did a lot of side-by-side comparisons of the Canon versus the Nikon, and even still have my Sony camera. And I was like, I had no idea that the colors really like out of camera are different and those files are different. And then the way that they behave once we get into Lightroom or Photoshop or Capture One, they behave differently. So I was like, oh gosh, darn it. So then I returned his camera and I thought, well, I'll buy a Nikon camera and start shooting with it for a while. Cause I do feel like you buy a new camera and you think, oh, this has changed my life. This is amazing. And then we get all hyped, but then over time that sort of wanes. So just to make sure that it was indeed like something that was really going to work for me, I bought a used D750 Nikon and then just started shooting with that. And there were certain things that coming from the Canon world, I was used to that I do think from a workflow perspective and like the user-friendly side of things, I kind of missed. But I also think part of that is just, experience with a particular camera system. But I was like, no, we're going to double down on this D750. And I actually ended up shooting my entire book on the D750 because I really did just fall in love with those colors. And that's the thing, right? The Nikon colors. And so then at that point, I got a new contract for a big project that I thought, okay, the D750 is great and I'm super proud of it, but I do need like something that's going to have one of the things, and this is like the stupidest little thing, but one of the things that inspired me then to go for the Z7, so graduating into the Nikon mirrorless world, is the ability when you're shooting tethered to capture one or drag and frame if you're doing stop motion animation, that you have the live view on the computer, that in a lot of the Nikon DSLRs, you lose any functionality on the camera. You can't see on the LCD and you can't fire the trigger. You can't do any of the things. Like the camera is pretty much just a brick at that point. All control has to happen on the computer. And that was just something from Canon world. I was used to being able to kind of jump between the computer and the camera. And so the Z series has the ability to still have full control, which is like the dumbest little thing. But when you get used to a workflow, that was just like something that I was like, if I could just have that, like the Nikon colors with the workflow that I was used to from the Canon. And so the Z series does that. And I do love, the larger files, but been super duper happy. And the glass is great in terms of the new Nikon Z lenses as well. So yeah, that was what kind of precipitated that change. But I still have the Canons. I'm actually filming myself. This is the Canon 5D Mark IV that's capturing me right now. So I'm still very much loving the Canons for the video. But I'm sure as we continue to watch all of the different manufacturers doing and racing to each other to see who can do better, that'll all evolve and change.
This is the thing, right? It's so important that you made the change for a reason. And for you, it was a really good reason because of the color sciences within these cameras. It just makes sense for the type of work that you're doing. Makes a lot of sense. Canon do edge towards magenta and yellows and reds a bit more. Funny enough, that's the colors that are in our skins. And that's why part of the reason why skin color looks so good on Canon, right? Mm-hmm. Sony's edge towards green. Not really sure what that's good for, but
everybody looks sick all the time.
It's just wrong in my opinion.
I always say, this is all in jest because I know plenty of Sony photographers, right? But no, I just always say like Sony colors, man, they're for hipsters. I don't know.
Well, I always think I think the same thing about Fuji colors, and in a weird way, I love them. Like I love Fuji colors. It's the one thing because it's funny you mentioned the D750 because that's exactly what I'm filming myself on right now, and that's my main studio camera. Just mainly because it's such a versatile piece of gear. It's such a great camera for so many different things. But it does have its drawbacks. And I was wondering whether you were going to mention. Well, if you hadn't mentioned the live view tethering thing, I would have mentioned it because it's exact. I'm like battling with the same thing every time I do a flat lay, for example. It's the same thing. It's frustrating. I have like little screens, like little like outboard screens that I use, so I can actually see what I'm doing. When you're adjusting one little thing, and it's highly frustrating.
The one thing that if Nikon could do this, and I'm like, if they could do this, this would I would be sold for life. Because the one reason, again, and this is like you said, like we do these things and the things that are important to us are not important to other people. So it all depends on the kind of work you're doing. But one of the things that Canon has done really, really well, and that I just give them nonstop kudos for, is their tethering software, their EOS Utility 3. Now, I shoot with Capture One for stills, but when it comes to shooting video, and especially if you're a content creator or somebody who's making their own videos, that you want the ability to control the camera while not being behind the camera. And so being able to use their EOS Utility 3 software, which is free, you just download it. And you can change camera settings, you can adjust autofocus, you can hit the record button, you can save straight to the hard drive. Like it is so fantastic. And Nikon doesn't have that. I mean, there is like their camera control, but it doesn't work in video mode. It only works in stills, and Capture One doesn't do video. So I'm like, who's going to come out with a software that I can use my Nikon tethered? I mean, unless there is, do you know anything?
Oh, yes. So I may have some really awesome news about this, because Nikon are actually coming out very soon. And I've just read this on Petapixel, actually. And they're coming out with a piece of software that will give you a lot of that functionality. Apparently, it's basically a video stroke photo editing software that's specifically geared towards Nikon cameras and Nikon files. And I'm wondering,
okay, if it does video, then I'm sold, because I saw that release, but I thought it was only for stills. So if it's for video,
yeah, apparently from what I've read, it's also for video. I took note of that because my daughter is doing her A levels, which is like the I don't know. Do you know what A levels are? It's like the British. It's the British version of your high school diploma.
Very good.
Essentially. And she picked photography as one of her main subjects.
Nice.
And she shoots on a little Nikon D3000. In fact, I think she's currently shooting on my D50-300 or something. But
nice.
Yeah. So, but but we're like, she needs some editing software, and we're talking about, Photoshop elements and whatever. But I just saw that Nikon are bringing out the software and it's free. I'm thinking, that's going to be great. So that's something possibly to keep an eye out on.
I will. Because to me, that's like the only thing that I really miss, when I'm filming with the Nikon but there are some other advantages, and one little, like, for those out there who love to poo-poo the Nikon Z autofocus, I think they're full of it, because the Nikon Z autofocus and facial tracking, I have had zero issues with. I think it's fantastic. So anybody who's like, oh, it's terrible, I'm like, wait, to who? What are you talking about? Because it does a great job.
So the one thing that I'm always reminded of is it's really that there really isn't a bad camera nowadays, because the differences are so minute. And I like to think about it like, 10 years ago, when autofocus wasn't even a thing, people still managed to shoot really great portraits. And, and 20 years or like 30 years ago, when digital wasn't a thing, there were great photographers in film. So, sometimes it's sort of like a little bit like, okay, well, if you can't create a photo without iFocus, maybe you should rethink your career. Is what the cynic in me would think.
But it's true. You can create a beautiful image, that I can hop on a Canon, a Sony, a Nikon, a Fuji. It doesn't matter what the camera is, a cell phone. The images are going to be informed by the experience you have and the way that you see the world and the way that you see the images. And so, it's anybody who's saying that the camera is holding them back from creating beautiful images, or, the thing that I hear all the time people tell me, is they're, okay, I'm ready to upgrade to a full frame camera. And I go, why? And they go, well, because I need to upgrade. And I go, no, you don't. It don't upgrade until you have a very specific reason. Like, what is the thing that's holding you back? If it's just purely you just want to physically be closer to the subject, well, just change your focal length. Like, let's not go invest in an entire camera to go from crop sensor to full frame. Like, what are the specific, like for me, I needed to be able to control both the camera and the computer at the same time, that I didn't want to have to just rely on the computer. Like, that was a very specific and compelling reason that I was willing to shell out, $3,000 for that little convenience that's now simplified my workflow.
Yeah. What a great conversation with Boo-Ray Perry a few weeks ago. We're talking about exactly that. People who start out maybe on a crop sensor camera and then think they have to sort of graduate to full frame because that's what all the pros use and so on. And of course, until we realized that, originally medium format was the pro thing, and then 35mm or full frame was like the kind of amateur thing, until that became so good that it then became the pro thing. And of course, now when you look at what Sony does on the APS-C sensor, in particular, Fuji. I mean, Fuji doesn't even have full frame sensors, but their camera's incredible. The X-T4 is such an incredible camera. And if it wasn't that I had so much money tied up in Nikon glass, I'd probably switch in a heartbeat. But it really ultimately doesn't. It really doesn't matter.
I don't get the whole, when people say that full frame changed their life, I just don't get it. Cause I'm like, my life did not change.
No, exactly. Yeah, it's one of these things. Personal preference, of course, I do think, comes into it, especially when it comes to like color rendering and stuff like that. So, I mean, it is true sometimes when I look at portraits shot on Canon, right out of the gate, as far as the skin tones are concerned, I can see a clear difference there, especially on video, I have to say. When I compare that to the Nikon cameras that I use, but likewise, when I shoot flat lays, I actually, especially when there's kind of cast iron and like kind of rustic materials involved, that I just love the Nikon. It just there's something that happens to those textures and the colors that's just, you can't, it's not even something I can put my finger on it. And probably Nick could analyze that much more scientifically and tell me exactly what the difference is. But this is just a feel thing for me. It just feels better to me. That's why I've got such a hard time making a decision, setting my Nikon gear, because I really don't want to, actually, for that reason.
We've been saying this for so long now, Kay, haven't we? That you have to have a really good reason, A, for upgrading your gear, general upgrading, and B, for transitioning to a different brand as well, because that costs. Full disclosure, I've just transitioned to Canon, but I had some good reasons, good reasons for it. But there's also the right tool for the job. So it's all about what is it that you're shooting. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what camera you use for it. We've established that many times. However, when you do get to certain points, there are different Nikon's great at certain things, Canon's great at other things. Yeah, they're both good at all of those things, but one does edge each other in certain scenarios. So unless you're making that money back, unless you're in a situation where you're using this for this reason every single day, save your money, spend it somewhere else, keep yourself working, and relax. Don't worry about those things that really don't matter just now.
Of course, the other truth is that the client will never know, and the client doesn't really care. Yeah, it's really just us photographers who are like, like pulling out all these little details, because ultimately it really doesn't make any difference. I always think it's spending a ton of money on changing your gear. You got to have, from a business perspective, you got to have a really good reason to do that. And so I always ask myself, does it make sense for me in my situation, in my business? When my camera body gets to the point, which it kind of is, where I'm thinking, okay, well, it's going to wear out now because it's got, God knows, 150,000 shots,
Whoa,
or whatever it is at the moment. I'm kind of thinking, okay, well, now I'm getting to the point where I'm running a risk. If I'm at a conference, and you shoot a lot, and you can't really afford it failing on me, then that's a compelling reason to change my gear, for me anyway. But cool. Now, one other slightly technical thing that I'm really interested in is your stop motion stuff that you do. That's I saw that actually. In fact, I think I saw that on your channel for the first time. I kind of thought, that's such a good idea. How do you create these little stop motion animations? That would really interest me to know.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, it's kind of an art in and of itself. And there's definitely a lot of little nuanced and interesting details about capturing stop motion animation. But I mean, it's a bunch of stills all stacked together, and throw those all into Premiere or Final Cut Pro, whatever you're using for video editing, and get the speed just right. And it looks like, the food is coming to life and it's animating itself. And it's definitely, it's one of the oldest forms of, creating video, but, think back to Mickey Mouse and, old school cartoons and things like that. So it's definitely been around for a long, long time, but I think it's having a resurgence because the way that stop motion just looks in terms of on social media, and it's very eye catching, and there's a lot of creative, fun things that you can do that you can't do in sort of more traditional video. I also like stop motion animation because though it is definitely very labor intensive, because all you're pretty much doing is, if you have coffee cup, for example, and you want that coffee cup and you're shooting it at kind of this straight on angle and you want it to turn around without hands and you want it to turn around on its own, like you just, turn it, take a shot, turn it, take a shot, turn it, take a shot, all these subsequent images one after another in order to build that together to make a video. But it just has this eye-catching sort of eye-popping sort of interesting, fun and creative things that you can do with that. So when I'm doing stop motion animation, I mean, you can pretty much do it with just your camera, as long as you have the ability to kind of see the scene. But there's a lot of really cool tools out there. I use Dragon Frame, which is a software for stop motion animation. And it's got a lot of very cool, helpful things for both the live view to be able to see the scene, but then it's got an onion skin effect. So you can see the most previous shot so that you can make sure everything's perfectly lined up. Because one of the secrets in effective stop motion is that you have continuity from image to image. So certainly shooting that with, an artificial light source, and that you don't have any sort of changes in your exposure. And as far as the scene is really locked down and you're on a tripod, but then you can just introduce all sorts of fun little actions and then stitch that all together in video. And, again, where video is not as forgiving is that if I'm doing a cooking video and I pour something and I don't pour it right, well, then I'm kind of stuck, right? I've got to restage the whole thing again. Whereas when it comes to the stop motion animation, we can just go back a frame or two, as opposed to having to kind of start back at the beginning of the sequence like we would in more traditional video format. So it's definitely a lot of fun, though. Again, it is definitely much more labor intensive because you just think about like inching a cupcake around or moving something across the frame inch by inch by inch. But it's a blast.
How do you decide what like frame rate you're going to be at? Are you always shooting with the idea that this is going to be in at 24 frames, 30 frames, whatever it might be? And then how do you decide, okay, how far do I need to move this mug? How does that process kind of work as you're going through the photos?
You definitely get a feel for it the more you've done it. Because if you want something to like zoom really quickly across the screen, right? Like we're going to have it make bigger leaps from each shot to the next, so that just in terms of that distance, that it's making that distance quicker. Whereas if you want something that looks like a lot more fluid, just like video would be, then we're really packing that. You talk about the 24 frames per second, then we're doing like ones, right? So that each individual, like maybe ones or twos, so that you've got like two of those frames are the same exact image. And so kind of that'll have a very different look versus running it at 12 frames per second, which I kind of like. Some of this is very stylistic and personal, and I'm sure also evolves over time. In the grand spectrum, I've not been doing stop motion animation all that long, so I'm still kind of developing my own personal tastes and style with it. But, shooting at the 10 or 12 frames per second sort of rate, it is fun because you get sort of this more jumpy, lively, poppy, that if you kind of set it to some fun, upbeat music, it has a certain amount of joy in it, as opposed to shooting something that's a little bit more fluid and true to life. So it kind of depends on that look. But again, you get into like Dragon Frame, you can go ahead and, as you're taking the shots, it's coming into the software and lining it up on a timeline. And if you have a miss shot or something, you can just, delete those off the timeline. But you can then go ahead and preview how all of that looks together, play it forward, play it backward, but then also play it at different frame rates. So then you can kind of make those decisions so that then when I take all those final images, process them and add them into Premiere, then I can kind of say, okay, well, I want this section specifically maybe to be at, that 10 frames per second, but I want to speed things up over here and do this at a different frame rate. So that is kind of, the frame rate of the whole video is constant, right? So I'm still at 24 frames per second for the overall like file, video. But as far as like how many of those frames are the same exact thing, then that's where we can kind of have some flexibility and play with it depending on the style that we're going for. But most of the stop motions that I've done so far to date are at the 12 frames per second. Again, it's 24 frames per second, but each frame has two, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you shoot those as JPEGs or as RAW and then edit them How do you?
I shoot them as raw and then I edit them just because I like that flexibility, and for the color correction, and especially too, if like a given video will probably have several different like sequences inside of it in terms of, maybe we start with the top down and then we move into the side and then we've got some close-ups that, I am working with a continuous lockdown LED, and the lighting should not be changing. Color temperature should not be changing. But in case there is any sort of like change or effect or something, that I just have that power for the color correction. But since all the images are effectively very similar within sort of a bunch of them, that we can just do that all in batch. But I try to, as much as possible, do anything that avoids Photoshop, because that then really, you can certainly do masking then and things like that. But if you've goobered something up and you need to fix it in Photoshop, that becomes rather laborious. And, frame by frame, that's when you start to lose your marbles.
Yeah, because we're talking about like rather high numbers of frames you'd have to shoot. Like, let's say if you did like, even if it's like I don't know, I'm guessing even if it's like a 20-second, like 15-second stop motion, we're talking about hundreds of images, right?
Oh yeah. It's tons, lots and lots of images. I did one to celebrate 200,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel with 200 cupcakes, and they're all dancing and all these things. And I forget exactly the duration of it, but yeah, it's I can't remember exactly how many frames, but it's probably near 1,000 frames that get stitched together. So yeah, you don't want to have to do too many individual work on individual frames, because that gets bonkers.
Nick, I feel another challenge coming on there. There'll be a stop motion challenge at some point.
I don't know if I have the patience. You need some patience and dedication to do one of those, don't you? How long do they typically take? If it's a 30-second clip that you want the final product to be, so to speak, the final film, how long does that take you to shoot on average?
A 30 seconds is long in stop motion. That could take half to a full day. Again, depends on sort of the scope of like how many components are coming in. When I've got like, again, the 200,000 cupcake video, well, I have 200 cupcakes in one shot and each of the cupcakes is all moving. Well, that means you have to move 200 cupcakes and then take a shot, move 200 cupcakes, take a shot, move 200, that's when you're like, why did I decide that I should do this?
Let's just go back to one cupcake there.
Yeah, one cupcake, right? And so, yeah, as opposed to just a single subject moving, so it just all depends. Because you can also do really fun things like in that video, you can have sprinkles, say, for example, like little sugar crystals. And I had them, my husband made a stencil for me in the shape of 200K. And so then we were able to fill that with the sprinkles and then remove that. So then there's sprinkles that say 200,000, on the surface. And then we've got like a little vacuum. And this is the handy part of having a very handy husband, as far as he's got his workshop and whatever. And so we kind of modified the vacuum to have a very small little like suction on it. So I could just suck up a little bit of the sprinkles at a time, take a shot, suck up a little bit at a time until I vacuumed up all of those sprinkles. And then if you play that in reverse, then it's the sprinkles writing themselves on the surface, awesome. Because they're all being revealed. So that is another fun thing you do is, do something backward, because that's an easier way to execute it, and then run it backward so it looks like that was unveiling or happening. So there's a lot of creative stuff with that in stop motion too.
So again, 10 years ago or something, when you were like doing a 9-to-5 in higher education, did you ever think that you were going to suck up sprinkles for a day job?
Not even in the slightest. I would have said, we modified our vacuum to do what?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of folks who do stop motion, that is what they do. They have so many funny tools and unique creative things that are a lot of times DIYs and other homemade solutions. Because, to create some of those armatures and to create some of those concepts, like you definitely need different kinds of materials and other things. So I'm sure the things we'll come up with in the next year as I keep doing more stop motion, add some really weird tools to the equation.
Well, it must be something that could be, of interest to potential clients as well. And it's just I'm thinking it's so uniquely, so quirky in a sense that that must be a good thing to add to your portfolio if that's something you could do.
About half the work I did last year for clients, like looking back at numbers and things like that, about half the work I did was video content. And I started to do more of the stop motion because exactly like it is different. It's unique. Not everybody has that expertise or how to execute that at a certain level. So that was something that was really nice to be able to have that, okay, these people need stills, but they also need social media content. They also need video for this or that, and the other. And the focus on video only continues to become more and more relevant as everything is happening online. And so how do you stop people in the scroll? How do you grab eyeballs? And so these different creative video methods are super duper helpful for that.
Yeah, I mean, this is really something I say all the time to fellow photographers is that now that we all have extremely capable video cameras in our hands just by virtue of actually buying a stills camera, because nowadays they're so capable, there's really no reason not to get into video. And I know a lot of stills photographers, traditionally have this this kind of mental barrier or this mental block when it comes to video. I'm not exactly 100% sure why. Maybe people might think it's a steep learning curve, and I've just learned how to use Photoshop, and now I've got to learn how to use Premiere or Final Cut Pro or something like that. But and of course there's an additional dimension, which is what I like about it, because it's just there's the story element to it, the movement over time. But it's definitely something I personally recommend to people generally is to really get into video and get used to working with video. Incidentally, when I was a kid, this is a long time before Nick was around. Well, I don't know. Actually, I'm older than Nick, so maybe sometime before Nick was around. When I was a kid, my first camera was actually a video camera, and I used to edit stuff between the camera and a VCR. So I used to press play on the camera, and then press, record on the VCR, and then you had these things called title generators, which were the things you plug in the middle, and you could create a title. Whoa, that's back in the day before computers.
It's like kids these days, like they don't know how easy this is now. Because 20 years ago, I really wanted to be on the show Survivor. I never got on the show Survivor, but I applied for like so many seasons, but you had to send in a VCR videotape of yourself and like your audition. And we made these, but I remember like how hard that was, like to get a camcorder and then to get that footage, and that like all that stuff was so hard. Now I'm like, literally, there are free tools. You can go get, DaVinci Resolve for free and create high quality cinematic videos. It's like, this is a no-brainer, man.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's, you can so easily do things like, blue screen or green screen, with Final Cut, even, in a living room. Back in the day, I remember building I used to mod little Star Wars models. And put stuff like Allen keys on them, spray paint them, and change them around and stuff. And I used to create these weird looking spaceships, and used to light up a globe, and hang them up on wires, and create these space scenes. Because I've seen some behind the scenes thing of Star Wars where they move the camera instead of the model, and so you make it look like it's flying and all that kind of stuff. So I used to do all of that on 8mm video, I think. Back in the day.
Fantastic.
But yeah, I mean that's really one of the main reasons why, first of all, I think Nick and me have something we have in common is that we always look at the behind the scenes thing as soon as when you you look at a DVD or you download a movie or something and there's a behind the scenes element to it, that's it. We're just we're just watching that. Screw the movie. Just want to see how they made it.
When was the last time you put a DVD on?
Actually, just as I said it, I realized I don't even have a DVD player. But funnily enough, my wife's just ordered a yoga DVD. She told me yesterday. I'm thinking, oh, that's good. Okay, yeah, yoga. I can get on board with that. How are we going to play it?
You say, can you play a DVD anymore?
No, I honestly can't. I think my old MacBook Pro might still have a DVD drive built in or something. I have to really think about that. So that is it. We have come to the end of episode 47 of the Camera Shake podcast with Joanie Simon. Joanie, thank you so much for being our special guest on the show this week. It was quite an education, I have to say. I also feel quite hungry now that we've been talking about food photography.
Definitely an occupational hazard. If you get into food photography, if you're making people hungry, though, you know you're doing your job right.
That's right. You should bring out another book, something like How to Keep Fit When You're into Food Photography.
There you go.
That's the thing. Anyway, so we have truly come to the end. It was absolutely amazing to have you on the show. For those listeners who are listening to the audio version of this, of course, be reminded you can head over to YouTube and check out our beautiful faces in full Technicolor. Also, wherever you are in the world, if you are listening to this or if you're watching this on YouTube, of course, please let us know where you are. You can get in touch via Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or send us an old-fashioned email if you want. It's camerashakepodcast@gmail.com. It's always fantastic to see where you are when you're listening to us, and let us know what you're up to. With that being said, that's it for us today, and we'll see you again next week.